Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar tonight. This is a Stand By What You Sell webinar that's been organised in partnership with Integrity Systems Company and the Tasmanian Government. So thanks for joining us. My name's Cherie Young. I'm the Integrity Systems Company Communications Manager. So I'll be your facilitator tonight. I will just, before we get going, just give you a bit of a rundown of what we're going to cover tonight. First, we're going to start off with an overview of the 7 LPA requirements, and that's going to be delivered by Elizabeth Bradley, who's the Quality and Compliance Manager at Integrity Systems Company. I will then give you a bit of an update on the eNVD and digital consignments, and then Elizabeth will go back to the NLIS and just an overview of that. Then we're joined by Mazino from Biosecurity Tasmania, who's got some information to give you on biosecurity and a bit of an update on sheep and goat eID, which is really good. And then we've got sheep producer Russel Fowler joining us tonight as well for a bit of a Q&A at the end, just to give us a bit of insight into his journey with eID, because he's an early adopter of that technology, and just thought it would be good to share what he's finding with it so far and how he's dealing with any challenges and what benefits he's gaining from it. So just a bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, and so a link will be sent to you in an email after the webinar with a recording, plus some resources that we've got for you to do with LPA, eNVD, NLIS, and some Tasmanian government resources as well. There's also a Q&A box in the bottom of your screen, and we've got representatives from Integrity Systems Company and Tasmanian Government in the background ready to answer your questions. So please pop them in as they come to mind, and we'll do our best to get to those for you. And that transcript of those questions will also be in that webinar that you'll receive in a couple of days. So keep your eye out for that. Now, before I pass over to Elizabeth, just a quick overview of where Integrity Systems Company fits in to the red meat industry in Australia. So we're a wholly owned subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia. So we are here to service and support the industry through the integrity programs that we operate. I will now, without any further ado, hand over to Elizabeth Bradley, who will explain to you a bit more about these programs and also the LPA. So I'll hand over to you now. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Cherie. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk tonight around the two sort of programs that ISC administers in service of the red meat industry. So one of those is the Livestock Production Assurance Program, or LPA for short. We love our acronyms. The other one is the NLIS, or the National Livestock Identification System. And so these two programs work together for the red meat industry to provide the assurance that's required around food safety, animal welfare, biosecurity and traceability. They work together, even though they're sort of their own little programs. With the LPA comes the use of the LPA National Vendor Declarations, which is your movement document when you're trying to move livestock from one property to another through the value chain. NLIS is the identification and recording of livestock movements, which is required under legislation as well. And that has to do with tracing in the event of a food safety incident or a biosecurity or animal disease outbreak. You know, Tasmania has lots of biosecurity protocols in place at the moment, so it sort of underpins that ability. If there was a disease outbreak or a food safety incident, we can trace that right back to where it happened and then try and mitigate it as best as possible. So tonight I'm going to run you through both the LPA and just some reminders around how NLIS works and your requirements under that as well. And just to put it into context for you, this is really important because approximately 70% of the red meat that Australia produces gets exported overseas. And these two programs are what we use to provide our international customers with the assurance that we're actually meeting their requirements in relation to food safety, animal welfare and biosecurity and things of that nature. So LPA is really important because most processors in Australia will require that LPA accreditation because it provides that assurance that you're doing the on-farm requirements that meet to a certain standard. And so that gives you more selling options effectively when you go to sell livestock, if that's what you're doing. It's really important as well, no matter what size your enterprise is, if you are selling into processing and selling into the food supply chain, for whether it's domestic or international, that we're following the LPA requirements for that food safety reason. So regardless if you have a few animals or lots and lots of them, that's why LPA is required. But if you just have a couple of animals and you just consume them yourself, you actually don't need LPA, but you always need to comply with your NLIS requirements. So that's just a broad overview of how the two programs work together and why they're important to Australia and your livelihoods at the end of the day. So we'll start with LPA tonight. LPA is a program, and you to participate in the program, you firstly need a PIC from your state government. And then once you have that PIC, you need to register and accredit within the program, and you need to renew that accreditation every 3 years to remain, in the program. And that gives you access to the national vendor declarations as well. So that means you can buy the books, or you can access the eNVD, which is the electronic versions of that through the LPA. The other things around LPA is that you need to carry out your farm practices to meet the LPA standards, which I'll run through in just a little bit, and keep good records in relation to that, so that when you actually go to fill out your national vendor decks, that you have the evidence to back up what you're actually declaring on those NVDs. The third thing to note here is that to verify that the program's actually working, we do audit producers in LPA. So signing up to the program means that you'll submit to audit if you get picked. We do both random and targeted audits, so we might pick you up if you're not doing NLIS transfers, for example. And that just provides verification again that the program's working and that we have enough, assurance in place for providing to that export market and food safety. So that's sort of how it all works. And I'm going to run through now sort of the 7 different requirements of LPA and what you need to do to be ready in case you do get audited as well. Okay, so there's 7 different elements of the LPA standards, which is where the requirements come from for what you need to do on farm. So they relate to property risks, your treatment of animals, the things you feed your animals, fit to load or getting animals ready for transporting, your traceability and livestock movements, so that's where your NVDs and NLIS requirements come into it. Also around biosecurity, which is really important, and animal welfare, so maintaining those animal welfare and the ethical side of what we do. So we'll run through each of these requirements and then I'll just explain to you why they're important and how they fit into the NVDs, so you can be prepared for audit and make sure that you're doing the right things as if you're LPA accredited. So the first one in LPA is the property risk assessment. So this one has a lens on food safety. So, the livestock that you grow ends up as food that we consume. So we need to make sure that it's not going to make humans sick if we do eat that meat. Property risk assessments is about identifying any risks on your property that might contaminate the livestock, so that when they actually do go to be processed, they might have a chemical residue or potentially have a contaminant from of a physical nature that then needs to be managed at processing to make sure it doesn't, end up in the food supply chain. For property risk assessments, there's 2 sort of key things here. So one is having a farm map that just clearly identifies any risks on your property. And then just even if it's a simple table, just says what those risks are and how you make sure that livestock don't get exposed to them, or you're minimising their risk for that. So common examples of risks that we're talking about is maybe old dip sites, broken fences, rubbish tips on your property, old machinery, batteries lying around, things of that nature. So just the common sense approach here is just excluding livestock from those things or areas so they don't come into contact with those contaminants. And the other part of this property risk assessment is if livestock do become accidentally contaminated, that's okay. You just need to have a process in place to identify them. And then when you do fill out those NVDs, making sure that you're declaring that on the NVD. So who's buying that animal from you knows that they have a status, or they might need to be treated a bit differently if they do go to processing. So that's sort of the property risk and how it feeds into food safety and the declarations you make on your NVDs. The next requirement is around safe and responsible animal treatment. So this one has, I like to think of it as a two-pronged approach. So one being that you want to make sure that you're giving the proper dose of the treatment to the animal, so that whatever it is that you're either trying to prevent or treat actually is an effective dose. So there's that veterinary side of things. The other part is having really good records to back up those treatments, so that again, when you're going to sell your livestock, you've got records to back up whether or not they might be in a withholding period or not. And that's important, especially if you're selling direct to processing, because if you're selling an animal that's in a withholding period, they might not be able to be processed until that expires. So you really have to be mindful of that. And keeping good records and knowing when you've treated and when you're moving animals off is really important. I know HGPs aren't used in Tasmania, so I won't touch on those, but having good storage, use and disposal practices is also really good. We want to be keeping chemicals away from livestock, and those records are really important. So keeping records of what you've treated, when you've treated it, what you've treated them with, including the name, the batch, the expiry date, and that withholding period. And then when that withholding period expires is also really important. If you do know that you're selling into an export market, sometimes there's something called an export slaughter interval, which could change slightly depending on the country. So it's important to be aware of that. All that information is on the label of your product, so it's important to have a look at that. Tips here is you can take a photo of it if you've got a smartphone or something of that nature, or you could keep that label in with your records as well, so that you've got a record of what you've actually treated with. So there's many different ways to do it, but there are LPA templates that actually give you all that information that you need to fill out. So that's really important that you do. And also making sure that you're not using expired chemicals, because that can actually be an ineffective dose or make the animal sick. So it's just very straightforward, practical things to do to make sure that you can, one, treat your animals effectively, and two, have those records to back up what's made on those NVDs. So moving on to the next element within LPA, we have this one. It's a very wordy title, but it's all around the food that livestock eat, or potentially the treatments that you're putting onto your pasture. So the two things here is around if you're using chemicals, so you're spraying for weeds or whatever it might be, that you're keeping good records, just like we are with our animal treatments. So what you've treated with, the batch, the expiry, any withholding periods. So we're not letting livestock graze food or grass or whatever it might be that's in a withholding period, because they might have that, they might then get that residue, and then if you go to sell them on, there might be a risk of them being contaminated. So it's about having good records of your chemical use on your property, storing everything properly, so away from livestock again, making sure you're disposing of your empty drums or expired chemicals properly. The other part of this is if you're buying in feed to feed your livestock as well. So the common thing here to protect yourself is to get a commodity vendor declaration. And so that's a declaration the person who's selling you the food can give you, that basically tells you whether or not it's been treated with a chemical and if it's in a withholding period or not. So you know when you can safely feed that to your animals or not. The other thing around pasture treatments is the person applying those pasture treatments or using those chemicals should have adequate training to do so. So having staff or yourself trained in things like ChemCert really goes away to making sure that they're done properly and responsibly. If you do accidentally allow animals to graze in a paddock or something that is within a withholding period, that's again important because it's a question on that NVD and you need to have records to back that up as well. So it all feeds into that food safety and minimising contamination as they move through the supply chain. That's enough on the food safety requirements. And we'll talk now about the next element of LPA, which is around the preparation for dispatch. So this is where we're getting livestock ready to transport, known also as the fit to load check. And this is audited under LPA. It's all about making sure that animals aren't stressed or injured or unfit for the journey that they're about to embark on effectively. So doing your checks in yard, making sure they're not lame, following that MLA fit to load guide is really handy, because it will give you all the checks and balances you need to look out for. Completing your NVDs properly, making sure if you're selling direct to processing that you've adhered to their curfews for food and water as well is really important. And that feeds into contamination with effluent and things like that as well. So this one's really important, that you do that as you're yarding and as you're checking and as you're loading, and having that good relationship with your transport provider and making sure that they're reputable and that you've got a good record of that whole transport situation. So that's fit to load. If you don't have a copy of that fit to load guide, it is available on the MLA website for free. You can kind of download it, or we can provide it in the EDM as well, that goes out for you in the email after this. The next requirement in LPA to talk about is biosecurity. So biosecurity, as we all know, is really important, and it's around minimising the risk of diseases, pests and weeds coming onto your property and basically making your property or your livestock, infected. So we don't want the disease or whatever it is to get established. So with biosecurity and LPA, you're required to have a biosecurity plan documented and in place, and it includes things that you can practically control. So we know we can't control birds flying overhead, but we're not trying to control that because it's not practical. It's more around things that you can control. So making sure you've got your fences in good condition, you've closed your gates where you possibly can, you've got signs up to alert visitors to contact you before entering. If people do enter unauthorised, that you contact the authorities and you make a note of it, so you know sort of potentially when they arrived and what areas they visited. Other things to do around biosecurity plans is managing incoming equipment, people, vehicles, food, and livestock that you might be bringing onto your property. This is important because they can all bring diseases or risks with them. So having clean down procedures potentially for equipment, getting animal health declarations for livestock you bring onto your property is also really important to know that they're disease free. Giving them a quarantine period, allowing them time to empty out as well. So there's that reducing that risk of weed seeds, going elsewhere on your property. It's also a good tool to monitor that livestock aren't sick. So once they arrive, you give them enough time so you can monitor them for ill health and signs of diseases. Other things, and probably the most practical thing, is remaining vigilant and inspecting your property and your livestock really regularly, and knowing the signs of diseases, so that if you do see something, you know what to do about it. It's important here that your biosecurity plan has in place the contact details for your local biosecurity officer or your animal health officer, as well as who to call if there is an emergency or you suspect something has gone awry and you want a hand. It's better to report it and have it be nothing than not report it and have it be something that's going to shut down the entire industry. So that monitoring part is really important, and at the end of the day, that's where you're going to pick it up, because it's your property and your livestock and your livelihoods, and you're out there every day looking after your animals. So they're just the key things on the biosecurity plans. We do have templates available in LPA around biosecurity planning. It asks you the standard questions to help you start thinking about what you do on your property and what you could implement as well. There's also various industry templates which are equally acceptable under LPA. With that as well, you can complete it in any format you like. So it can be paper, you can do it on the computer. You can also do it through your LPA account. So there's a function and a form that you can fill out, and you get a document at the end of it, which is your plan. Training your staff, if you have any, in that plan is also really important, so they know who to call and what to do in different situations. And regularly reviewing it is also really important, especially if you've got changing situations or you've bought another property. It's really important just to keep it current and updated. But that's biosecurity, very briefly, but we'll move on to animal welfare. So animal welfare in LPA is around meeting that community expectation that we're caring for our livestock in a way that's best practice. So in LPA, to meet this requirement, you need to have a copy of the relevant standards for your livestock. So there's one for cattle, one for sheep, and one for goats. If you have more than one, you can have all three. For that as well, it's around reading and understanding it. Completing the LPA training modules around animal welfare is also important to demonstrate that you do have that knowledge of those standards, and making sure that if you have staff that are doing animal husbandry practices, that you've either given them training in the standards and they know what are welfare requirements around those husbandry procedures, or put them through the LPA training as well, because you can repeat it and do it as many times as you like on your account. So there's that for animal welfare to provide that assurance around how we raise and produce our livestock in Australia. Now on to livestock transactions and movements. So this is, it's actually number 5 in the LPA standards, but I decided to do it last just so it will link nicely into the NLIS requirements at the end. So this is where it all comes together. So this is around completing your NVDs. So having all of those records and information about your property and your production practices. And when you go to move livestock off your property, completing that national vendor declaration and answering those questions truthfully, and having those records to back up sort of the answers on those questions. So all those questions that get asked on the NVD relate to LPA requirements. The other things around this section of the LPA standards is obtaining copies of NVDs if you're buying livestock onto your property. So that's really important, so that you as a buyer are aware of their treatment history, potential issues and things of that nature. So that's you have to, give an NVD every time you move livestock, and get a copy if you're buying them in. The other side of this section of LPA brings in the NLIS requirements, which is around identifying your livestock with NLIS approved devices, and then recording movements in the NLIS database when you bring livestock onto your property, because the receiver of livestock is responsible for that transfer in the NLIS database. So NVDs are really, really important because they communicate the food safety history and all of those information that the purchaser needs to know about the livestock that they're buying or receiving. NVDs come in both paper and digital, but the problem with paper is that people don't fill them out properly. Could be because you're in a rush, and we understand it, but they actually become invalid because they're a legal document. So not being able to read the handwriting, not having the questions answered properly, not signing them, also a big problem. It's a compliance issue that the states actually deal with, and it's a problem. So making sure you're completing all the NVD questions properly, not answering questions twice, and completing it in full is really, really important to make sure it's a valid NVD. The other option is to use the electronic NVD, which forces you to answer the questions because you have to answer all the questions in order to submit the form. But I'm going to pause there and have a breather, and I'm going to let Cherie talk to you about the eNVD benefits and also our new eNVD mobile app as well. So Cherie, I'll hand back to you for that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, you enjoyed that breather. You must need it after all that. There's so much to cover in LPA, but thanks so much for that. So Elizabeth's given me a really good entree into the discussion about digital consignments and why transitioning to digital consignments is so important. I guess the first place to start, Elizabeth sort of already raised it, but is the challenges that are presented by paper NVDs. So key issues here, as Elizabeth alluded to, is, that, well, essentially they're hard to, ensure that you're getting everything right in there. There's lots of room for errors. The paper forms can be lost, misfiled or damaged. The other issue is the paper books can go out of date and a new NVD can be, new NVD book can be created, but that takes time to filter through the supply chain. So you might find yourself accidentally filling in an old version, which isn't going to be acceptable. Whereas with the electronic, the electronic version, you just go straight into the current version. But as you can see here, there's issues around being able to read the form, issues of the form not being filled in correctly. So there is a lot of issues there to do with paper NVDs. And so with that in mind, that was why Integrity Systems Company went off and created the eNVD web-based system. That this system was first launched in 2018, and it provided a much more efficient way of filling in these consignment documents. It also reduced a lot of duplication. You're not having to repeat the same information across different forms. It was all sort of there. So there was lots of reasons why this was a good introduction to, ensure the robustness of the integrity system can be maintained. They're obviously a lot easier to read, they don't get lost, and they just simplify that data entry through the supply chain as well, because you've got everything captured digitally. The other benefit is when it comes to LPA audit time, you've got all your forms there ready to go. So it's much easier for the auditor to sort of look through everything and make sure that you're where you need to be. But like with many new things, there was problems, mainly around no internet. Major problem when you don't have internet where you need internet, as in down at the paddocks, in the yards where you actually want to be transmitting documentation. So to try and overcome this challenge, Integrity Systems Company went off and created the eNVD Livestock Consignments app, which has an offline functionality in it. So whilst you need internet to download the app and sort of get yourself set up on it, you can transfer consignments through the app system by using this QR code function that it has between app to app. So that has created a major bridge over that connectivity issue, which was a big problem out there. So since we launched the app in March, it has been downloaded over 15,000 times, and month by month usage is increasing. So there's lots of, there is a lot of uptake out there. There is a lot of work, however, in getting supply chains ready and able, and across how to use this app through all the steps in the supply chain. So there's a lot of work going on with our adoption team out in the field for the last 18 months, working with the processors, the feedlots, the transport sector, agents and sale yards to try and help them all become digital ready. So that work's continuing, but it's early days, but the work is continuing to get that going, where eventually we'll get to a system where we'll be able to just, in a perfect world, transmit this data digitally through the system. So it's all digitally captured, which obviously has enormous benefits for traceability. But yes, so it is important to keep in mind, though, that the most important thing, though, if you're wanting to use the app, is just to check in with your transporter and your receiver, just to make sure that they're ready and able to receive digital consignments. And if they still need a paper form, you can print out the paper form from the eNVD system, either the web or the app. You can also email it as a PDF from your phone to their email, or you can text it to them. So there is that option as well. And you might think, well, what's the point if I've just got to print it out and give them a piece of paper? But there is benefits because you've got that data digitally captured. So it is there and it can be picked up down the line, which has got benefits. It is important to remember, though, even with this, there still is the need to do your NLIS, for a receiver to do the NLIS transfer as well. So there is that as well. But yes, the app is certainly something that we're really happy to get feedback on, because this is a work in progress. There are new releases coming out regularly with new features and new alignments to the web system, so that they start to be very similar in their look and feel and their function. We would really love it if you could, any feedback you might have or thoughts, we're happy to receive those. It will help our tech team guide in the next steps of work that we undertake with this. And we've also got a lot of resources there available to help you use the app and the web system online. There's a variety of resources there, and our customer service team are always very happy to help you navigate any challenges that you might have with it. But yeah, so that's a bit of an update on digital consignments and where we're at with that. I will now go back to Elizabeth to keep presenting on NLIS now. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Cherie. Carrying on from that, I'm going to just cover off on the livestock transactions or the NLIS requirements around livestock movement. So the National Livestock Identification System, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, is a legal requirement. It's in legislation that you identify and record movements of livestock in the NLIS database. So there's three sort of key pillars, I guess we call them, around how we do traceability, not just in livestock, but pretty much any kind of commodity. So one is being able to identify properties, which is where PICs come from. The second is identifying the commodity that we're trying to trace, which is the livestock in our instance here. And the third part is having a central repository for all that information to record the movement. So that's the NLIS database in our situation. So PICs are the identification codes for a property. With PICs, if you have more than one, that's fine. You just have to remember that if you're moving livestock between them, you actually need to record those movements, even if they're all your own PICs. A tip here as well, if they're close enough together, maybe talk to your state department about amalgamating your PICs together so that you don't have to do that, and you can actually use the one NVD and not have to do transfers between your own properties in that case. But talk to your state department about how you can do that. So PICs are everyone gets a PIC, so not only do producers get them, but also feedlots and sale yards and processors. So we can track those movements between those properties or those locations. So that's sort of the location side of the traceability system. The second part is identifying the livestock. So with animal identification, for NLIS purposes, you need to use an NLIS approved tag that has an NLIS logo on it. That means that it's been trialled and tested under supervision of ISE, and it's met all the requirements around standards that are around devices. With that, you can have a visual or an electronic tag, which I know we're transitioning away from visual in the coming years for sheep and goats, but cattle need to have an electronic or an eID applied. It's one eID per animal as well, because they scan and you only want one animal identification associated with one animal. For cattle, it needs to go in the right ear, and sheep and goats, it can be in either ear. So I know some people put male and female in different so that they can trace that, but that's really important to note. For the colouring system around tags as well, so for cattle, if the cattle was, or the animals were born on your PIC or your property, you can put what's called a breeder tag on them, which is white in colour for cattle. If they've lost their tag for some reason, you can put an orange breeder tag, post-breeder tag in them. So that means that they weren't born on your property. If you do have the tag that fell out or stopped working, you can actually do a linkage between that white tag and the orange tag, so you don't lose traceability in the data, like for that animal as well, which is an important thing that eID can actually do. For sheep and goats, we have the year of birth colouring system for the breeder tag. So when you buy tags for, sheep to apply on sheep and goats that are on your property, you can pick the year of birth colour. The default colour is actually yellow if you don't want to subscribe to the colours, but that's fine too. And post-breeder for sheep and goats, the colour is pink. So that's the colouring system for those ones. There's lots of different design types, and it's important to, give some a try or look at the reviews and find the one that suits your needs the best there as well. To explain for you around eID, because it's very topical, especially around sheep and goats transitioning into that type of device. eIDs contain a microchip, and that microchip, we call it a radio frequency identification, or RFID for short. And it effectively means that microchip is encoded with a 16-digit number. So on the screen there, that's that top number. And that number is unique, and it gets associated or linked together with something called an NLIS ID. I can say that really fast. So that one, it contains your PIC. So if you're going to buy tags, eIDs in particular, it'll have your PIC on that tag, which gets printed on the outside of that device. That ID number, that visual one, you can actually read on the outside of the tag. It also has a code or a letter for the manufacturer of that tag, whether it's a breeder device for a cow or a sheep or a goat, and then what year it was made. It also has a serial number so that you can keep it unique as well. So those two numbers, the one that gets encoded on the microchip and that visual number on the outside of the tag, they get linked together in a file. And that the person that, or the company that you're buying those tags off will actually upload them to the NLIS database for you. And then they'll post them out to you so that you can actually use them. But that's how they get onto the NLIS database in the first place. So making sure that you're ordering for the correct species is really important, because sheep and goat tags are actually the same device in most cases, and you need to specify the species that you're actually wanting to apply them to, and being careful that you don't actually accidentally apply the wrong one. So cattle devices are only approved for cattle, and sheep and goats only for sheep and goats. But if you've ordered goat tags, you need to put them on goats, and the same for sheep as well. Tags can be read with a scanner or a reader, and that reader will actually collect all those tag numbers, usually the RFID number, because that's the one that the tips have in them that they're reading. And that can actually be transferred to your computer, which you can then use to upload and do that transfer in the NLIS database. So that's the next part of NLIS, or the third sort of pillar that we talk about. So recording the movements of livestock in the NLIS database is the important part. So it is the responsibility of the receiver of the livestock. So if you're selling to another producer, the producer that you're selling to is responsible for doing that transfer in the database. Even if it's a mob-based movement with a visual tag at the moment, they're responsible for saying, yes, I've got, I bought 1,000 sheep from producer here, and now they're on my property, to start that tracing. eIDs is where you need that tag file from the reader to do that transfer in the database as well. And that's how cattle works at the moment. So if you're selling to a sale yard or direct to a processor, then they'll do that transfer because they're the ones receiving those livestock. Be careful around selling platforms like Auctions Plus and Facebook, as they don't do those transfers. So it's a little bit harder to get the information required from those ones as well. So that's the general overview around the NLIS and recording livestock movements. Generally speaking, you need to do that movement recording as quick as possible. So in LPA, we say, 48 hours or 2 business days to do that, because that really underpins, if there was an issue, that we've got current data in the system as to where livestock might have been, or where they might have come from as well. So really critical around tracing efforts, especially if we had a disease outbreak and needed to trace things quickly. So the other part in here, which links into the LPA requirements and the NVDs, is you can actually, when you record a movement in the database, is record the NVD serial number. So then we're linking the LPA to the NLIS transaction when you record that movement, which is really important. And the eNVD platform that Cherie was talking about actually helps digitize and automate that process a little bit too, which also means that there's less data entry at the long run. So it all links together, and it's really important in terms of traceability and having backups as well. So that's me in a nutshell around LPA and NLIS requirements. So what I'll do now is I will hand over and take another breather to Mazino, who's going to run you through the government updates. So there we go.
All right, thank you very much for that. So my name is Mazino. I'm the Senior Policy Officer here in Biosecurity, Tasmania, and I work with the Primary Produce Traceability Program. As part of what we do in our program, we allocate and amalgamate peaks. So if you've got multiple properties and you've got multiple livestock moving between properties, sometimes some producers just want to bring all the properties under the same peak. It also makes it easy for them so that they don't have to fill out multiple forms, as long as those properties are within a specific geographical radius. And so if you do want to amalgamate your peak, you can always contact the department, and then that will be done through our program. We also authorize livestock producers or owners for NLIS. In most cases, when you apply for a peak, you also need to apply to be granted permission to other tags. And in some cases, you find producers that have a peak and then they try to go on other tags online, and then the manufacturers tell them they don't have approval. So when you apply for a peak, you can often opting to also tick the box that says apply for an NLIS approval. That simplifies the process. So that once you get a PIC, you also get the approval to other tags, and then you can go online or go to any manufacturer that can help you to produce the tags that are approved by NLIS. The manufacturers and those who sell tags, the agents and the rural stores, they do have mechanisms to verify that producers are authorized for tags, and we also do approve those manufacturers in the type of tags that they can use within the state, but it's generally the tags approved by NLIS anyway. We regulate biosecurity requirements for livestock. So that means that all the same standard requirements that is in NLIS, in most cases, would also apply to what we require from producers. If you have a property with the livestock, you need to have a PIC, even if it's just a single animal. If it's for cattle, sheep, goats, or even pigs, you need to have a PIC. You can always apply for PICs online, or you can always contact the department via email, and then you'll be sent the paper-based forms, which you can then send via post, or you can drop them at our offices in the south, in Hobart, or in the north here in Devonport. We regulate livestock movements on and off the database, and that means that just in case there is, or in the event of an outbreak, we do want to be assured that producers are notifying the database in alignment with the regulations. If you move an animal if you sell a livestock, for example, you have an obligation to ensure that that livestock has an NVD. If you're part of LPA, if you're not part of LPA, we do have what we call a generic vendor declaration, which you will still need to accompany with the livestock and give to the a buyer. The one who is receiving the livestock has to notify the database, but at the same time also keep the records of the vendor deck. For cattle, it's usually 2 years. For sheep and goats, currently they are all in mob-based movements, and that's 7 years. We are contacts if you have any questions and you want to get some clarifications around what your obligations are. I've put in some links in there that would help you. You can always visit the links, and then there'll be materials also to aid your understanding around what regulations would apply to you if you have cattle, sheep, and goats, or even for pigs, just in case. Next, yep. Just on a side note here, we do have what we call the General Biosecurity Direction for livestock traceability. The direction was taken by the chief by the state's chief veterinary officer, coming off the increased risk of FMD and LSD coming from Indonesia, and that was enacted last year and will remain in effect for the next 5 years. The GBD basically summarizes what I've just said. If you are a producer, you need to have a PIC, and the reason why we try to reinforce that obligation is because there are cases where you may be a hobby farmer and you just have 1 or 2 stock on your property, and for some producers they think they don't need a PIC, but you do need a PIC even if it's just a single animal. The animals must be tagged. If you're pigs, you need to register for a tattoo, and you can always register for tattoos by sending an email to our department. The address will be provided somewhere down in the slide. And the animals must be tagged before they leave the property, just the same way the pigs also have to be tattooed before they leave the property. That provides that sort of identification and would also facilitate traceability in the event of any investigation or an outbreak. Just as I've said in the previous slide, you need to supply a vendor deck. If you're part of the LPA, you would have access to the LPA NVD. If you're not part of the LPA, if you're just a hobby farmer with just 1 or 2 animals that you're moving or you're selling to someone else, you still need to apply for a generic vendor declaration. You can always contact the department. You will be approved and be given a generic vendor deck, which you can then accompany with the livestock when you're selling or moving them between multiple properties. The GBD also prescribes that you have to notify the database within 2 days or 48 hours of animal movement. And just as Integrity Systems has said, the earlier you notify the database, the easier it is for us to use that data to really undertake a traceback investigation if we need to during an outbreak. I've put in a link there for the GBD for livestock owners. It summarizes what your obligations are as producers. So we classify producers as anyone who has even just one livestock. So if you just have a livestock, the GBD still applies to you. The GBD is in force, and so it's there's an offence that comes and an infringement that comes with it when producers do not comply with the regulations. Nationally, I'm very sure many of us will be aware there's been a national agreement for the mandatory implementation of eID for sheep and goats. Just as the state, we have also taken that aspirational target in consultation with industry that all new lambs born by the 1st of January 2025 should be tagged. And that principle also applies for lambs, for sheep and goats that move off property. They have to be tagged, and that the supply chain participants, the producers, the sale yards, the agents, the abattoirs, where those animals move through, will need to have the capacity to scan those tags and be prepared to also notify the database in alignment with other regulations that apply to the cattle. The department has put in 2 groups to facilitate consultation with industry and to provide advice. So we have the sheep regulatory advisory group. And what the group basically would do is to sit in a government to work with the industry and also work with producers on how to transition from the current visual mob-based approach to tracing to the eID approach. And that would involve our discussions around infrastructures, what sort of infrastructures need to be put in place at the sale yard. That would also involve capacity and management to ensure that producers have access to tags, and they would also be able to tag their animals when this new target comes into place. We do also realize that we have a couple of goat producers in the state. We also have a goat regulatory advisory group. And similar to what the SRAG does, is to work within government or work with governments in alignment with industry to come up with a plan on how to implement that eID requirements for goats. There are a number of options which have been discussed, but as we get closer to that date, the appropriate mechanisms for tagging will be provided to the producers and also to the public. And that would also have to meet the requirements for coming from NLIS on what tags will be safe to be used, what tags will perform well to allow them to be scanned, so that the producers who are scanning them or actors in the supply chain who are scanning them can also notify the database when they read those tags up from the devices. To align with this national arrangement, the department is also developing new regulations. And the regulations that have been developed will also align with the sheep and goat eID implementation, but also bring in the cattle to make sure every livestock species are now on the same plane. Because currently we do have different requirements for both cattle and the sheep and goats, but that's going to change from the 1st of January 2025. The regulations are currently in the draft form. There will be some consultation done with industry and also with producers on what the regulations will look like before they come into force. And industry will have the opportunity to also give feedback prior to it being enacted and passed into law. Once that is enacted, it will fall under what we call the Biosecurity Act. And the Biosecurity Act now provides the head of power on how we manage biosecurity within the state. That would involve not only livestock, but other primary produce that would affect both the industry, but also the risk for the incursion of pests and diseases coming into the state. If you've got any questions, please, you can feel free to send an email, but at the same time, feel free to just drop in something there in the chat. Yeah, thank you very much. And over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mazino. That was excellent. Yes, as Mazino said, please put your questions in the chat. They can be answered in the Q&A box as we go, and there'll be a recording and a transcript of all the questions and answers will come out to you after this webinar in an email. So keep your eye out for that. Now, great introduction now for Russ Fowler, who joins us tonight to talk about his experiences using eID. He's been using eID on his sheep for 11 years, I believe.
11. Yeah.
Yeah, so quite a long time. So thank you for joining us, Russell. I guess just be really good to share, got some questions to go through with you, just to share your insights into how you found adopting this technology along your journey. I guess the first one, just to get into it, is can you share how you're currently using eID and what your plans are for the future?
Yeah, so currently we have all our ewes have electronic tags, including all our ewe lambs. So in the years previous, the last 2 years previous, we've tagged all our lambs with electronic tags. But this year, due to availability of getting hold of electronic tags, we've only done our ewe lambs, both terminal and maternal lambs. So yeah, we're using it to keep track of our scanning data for our ewes, and we're also weight gains in lambs that we're finishing. We're sort of looking towards doing big, developing data dumps for anyone buying our store lambs, so that they can, we'll do, when the electronic tag goes in the lamb, on the lamb marking cradle, there's a weight taken then, and then a weaning weight. So they'll have access to that data on what was used for that. So we're like trying to give those people that are buying our lambs to finish, more data for them to utilise.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. I'm sure that they must accept that. That must just give them that extra layer of information that they maybe wouldn't have gotten previously. So it's really, really good. I guess I just want to take a step back. 11 years in now, why did you adopt eID in the first place?
So yeah, that 11 years ago, I came home from ag college, from Marcus Oldham, and I think it's general approach that you bring something home with you. So I brought a auto drafter from New Zealand. It was called a H-Dale. There wasn't many in that space then. So I got Gallagher have now taken them on and are using them. So yeah, it's one of the original ones. There's some footage there of it operating. It's sort of been a developing process over those years. So to start with, we were only doing a handful, of sheep. We're doing some merino, meat sheep testing, that sort of thing. So yeah, it sort of developed from there. And in 2018, we actually went through and re-tagged all our ewes to bring them all up so that they were all electronic tags. And then yeah, ever since then we've kept all ewe lambs get an electronic tag.
It's great. Yeah, the system looks like, you can just see how it's running extremely well there. That's incredible. Rather than having to do it all manually, must make life easier.
Yes, well, yeah. So we're actually finishing at the moment. Our numbers are building up, so we won't be able to finish all our lambs, but we're sort of doing 7,000 lambs, finishing 7,000 lambs a year, and all through this system. So it's sort of originally when we first started with it, I was doing it on mob-based data collection. So it was more to do with the forecasting, you know, how many lambs were going to be ready for the next load, so that we could book those in, and also look at forward contracts on how many would be ready at what weight. And then it also, we were able to get a better understanding of how many grams per head per day the mob was doing. But now we've really refined that and able to keep our finger on the pulse in terms of our weight gains.
That might lead me a bit into this next one. Next question is just about quantifying the value of using eID. How can you do that?
It's it's a hard one, because it's like, for instance, with weight gains, it's a lot of 1%ers that make that up. You know, you can go from 150 grams a day to 300 grams per day, but it's not just by doing one thing, it's multiple things that have caused that to get a significant change. So it's, I mean, you can drill into it as much as you like, but I think it's, you know, effectively, if we're putting 10 kilos on a lamb, that's, and we're going from 150 grams a head per day to 300, they're eating the same amount, whether they're putting on 150 or they're putting on 300. That means that at 300, we're turning off twice as many lambs with the same amount of feed. So it really gives you the balance of analysing that data without putting a number on it. It's more, you know, you can see the benefits just by a glance. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, the next one was just about how have you overcome any challenges that you might have encountered along the way with this?
Yeah, so I've got two examples with this. The first one's about we had, and quite a few producers would understand this. Last year we had a bout of pneumonia in our lambs, and yeah, it was really interesting because we knew about it well before most people knew about it. So most people were sort of finding out about it around the March period, whereas we knew about it in December because we were able to monitor our weight gains and we could see that there was an issue. And then we were able to, you know, is it worms? No, it's not worms. You know, what is it feed? Like what, and go through the process of eliminating those ones to actually find out what it was. I mean, admittedly, with pneumonia, you can't do anything about it unless you treat them with antibiotics, but everyone knows that then we're affected by being able to kill them. So yeah, it was like we had to lower our weights, but because of that, our real win with that was meaning we weren't taking our contracts because we weren't getting our weight gains. So we could see that was happening. So we weren't booking in lambs and not being able to fill those contracts, which was the real benefit with that one. Yeah, and then the other one, to give an example, is because we do all our scanning data, it was a couple of years ago now, we actually kept our dry ewe lambs. And as most people would say, this is a bit of footage of we use a Gallagher wand, and that data coming through is telling us what that ewe is actually going to have. We enter that in at the scanning crate, and then we're able to just go along with a rattle and mark out the ones that we want to come out. So it makes it really simple, and then you can just draft them out rather than actually having to put them through the auto drafter. It's a very quick way of doing it. So yeah, sorry to divert there, but with the ewe lambs, those dry ewe lambs that we kept, a third of those had triplets the following year. So it sort of highlighted the point that it's not actually that they're infertile or later maturing. It was just more the fact that they were probably out of a triplet or something like that, and that they still have that fecundity. So without doing that and having that information, well, you couldn't determine that.
Yeah, right. That's incredible. Yeah, I guess maybe I'm thinking maybe one of the a challenge that you might face is just the amount of data that you end up with and sort of knowing what to do with it. Is that
yes,
something that you come across?
Yeah, that is the issue. Like early on in the piece, before AgriWeb and or Gallagher have got their own stuff now and that sort of thing. Before they came about, it was just pulling it and using it on Excel spreadsheets and breaking it down that way. It's quite cumbersome and stuff like that, but there is becoming more development in that space for, people that don't feel as tech savvy like with using Excel. There are more ways of doing that now and more learning methods, which has certainly helped. But that has been a real challenge.
Too much information sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
Then next question, Russ, is just on infrastructure, and what infrastructure do you recommend producers need to just get started with this?
Yeah, well, it's sort of you really need to look at what you want it for. So, I mean, these two videos that I've got are two types of systems. So if you're looking for visual stuff that you want to record and, stuff that you want to enter, then the wand is a great way to start because you've got the ability just to manually draft sheep out or cattle or whatever. But if you're looking for more weights in lambs or cattle, then definitely an auto draft or an indicator is the way to go.
Yeah, so there really is just such a big spectrum there from the base level to, quite complex setup. So, yeah.
Yes, and the reason I went with the Gallagher one is just the visual side of it. They've changed, or they've all changed rapidly. But I just found for our system, with our staff and stuff like that, having those visual makes it very simple and easy to use. Like you can see with a wand, like it comes up different colours for different lines of stock. So it just helps that way. But I mean, it's horses for courses on what systems you use. You just need to have a look at what's best for you.
Excellent. And yeah, last one, Russell, for tonight is just what advice would you have for others out there that are looking at getting started with this?
Yeah, I think really it's anywhere's a good starting point. I mean, having gone through it all, I think that like the way that I've found my feet with it, through just doing a bit to start with, whether it's just your ewe lambs or or whether it's a handful of sheep that studs and stuff like that. It's just a good way to start, and then as you can see the benefits in it, then increase and get a better handle on how to utilize the data and stuff like that. But I reckon just make a start is the best way.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's the best place to start. So yeah, absolutely. No, look, Russell, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I think, you've provided some great insights there. We'll be sharing this recording out to everyone who registered for the webinar tonight. So if anyone wants to catch up on anything Russell raised, you can go back through it that way. Plus the Q&A will come out as well. But look, really thankful grateful for your time tonight, Russell, to go through all of that. And thanks to Mazino and Elizabeth and Bridget, who helped organise the webinars. Tanya and Verity are in the Q&A box tonight answering all the questions. There's just a survey link there that's just been put in. It'd be great if you could fill it in so we know what you think. If there's any other topics you'd like us to cover, we're happy to do that. There's also information there on your screen now for Integrity Systems website and customer service contacts. You know, don't be afraid, get in touch if you've got any questions to ask us. We're very happy to help you navigate all of these systems. But yeah, I guess the main thing is just to remember that, I guess just as a basic disclaimer that, you know, we can't do this for you, but we're definitely here to help you. And we hope this webinar has gone in some way towards helping with that. And we'd love your feedback. So yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. And thanks to the team for bringing it together. And we'll see you soon. Okay, bye.